Okay, so what I have here is a sheep eye, and you'll notice right off the bat, there is a lot of fat around the eye. So remember that about 70% of our sensory receptors are in the eye. So the first thing I want to do is actually just cut off some of that fat so we can actually see more of the eyeball. And while I'm cutting this, you'll actually notice that there's some of this white material, and then there's also some of this kind of brownish, orangish material. These are the extrinsic eye muscles. So remember, the extrinsic eye muscles are the muscles that are attached to the eye that are going to move the eye. So remember, we have 6 extrinsic eye muscles. We have the superior, inferior, medial, and lateral rectus muscles. And then we also have the superior and inferior oblique muscles, which go above and below the eye. So I'm just going to get rid of a lot of this fat and a lot of this muscle, so that way we can actually see more of the eye itself. So lots of fat because we're protecting the eye. Okay. So the first thing that I look at is I look at this area here that is kind of cloudy. That's the cornea. The cornea should naturally be clear and transparent. And the reason being is because we really want that to be transparent, so that way light can shine through the eye. And so remember that we have a nerve that comes in through the back of the eye. So this thing right here is the optic nerve. And we're going to kind of need that for reference in just a little bit. You'll also notice that we have this nice white connective tissue. That's the sclera. So the sclera and the cornea make up the outer layer of the eye called the fibrous layer. And then once again, we have these muscles. So whenever I'm about to cut this eye, what I am looking for is I'm actually feeling along the edges here of the cornea. And I'll notice that there's kind of a squishier part right here, and then that goes into much thicker, much harder tissue. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut along that space there. And remember that we have fluid in the eye, right? We have the aqueous humor and the vitreous humor. So in the anterior segment before the, in front of the actual lens, we have aqueous humor. So when I squeeze on the eye, you'll actually notice the liquid coming out. That's some of that aqueous humor. So now that I've cut that little slit, I'm actually just going to go along the entire circumference here of the eye, and I'm cutting along that soft spot. I want to make sure that I'm continuing to go along the soft spot because it's a lot easier to cut. And I'm basically just going to remove the front portion of the eye from the back portion of the eye. Okay. So when I do that, this is the posterior portion of the eye here, and this is the anterior portion of the eye here. So this thing here that I'm removing now is called the lens. So the lens, remember, is this biconvex structure. This is what is going to accommodate. It's going to extend and then contract and bulge in order for you to actually be able to focus light onto the retina, which you can actually see back there. So we're going to start with the anterior aspect of the eye, and the first thing I'm going to do is kind of remove some of this extra gel that we have around. And what I want you to notice is this eye kind of looks like a mushroom gill. You can actually see those little, they basically looks like it's striped, okay? So the underside of a mushroom cap is basically what that would look like. So here in the center is where the pupil would be, where this light is. So what I want to do is I actually want to separate this structure from the cornea and from the rest of it. So I'm kind of going into that area where the pupil would be, and I'm basically moving that probe until I can separate the color portion of the eye and that ciliary body, that mushroom gill, and then also from the cornea. So if I wanted to, I could actually remove the cornea, but that area right there is the cornea. I'm not going to go much further than that. So what I have done is I've taken off basically the second layer. The second layer remember, is the vascular layer. The vascular layer also in the front has the ciliary body. So all of this striped stuff that kind of looks like the underside of a mushroom cap is that ciliary body. On the front now, we can actually see the iris. The iris is the color part of the eye, and then the pupil in the center. So the iris and the pupil are basically controlling how much light is coming into the eye. So that's the front part of the eye. The back part of the eye is, you're going to notice that we have kind of a gel, okay? So that is definitely a gel-like fluid. That is the vitreous humor. So the vitreous humor is in the posterior segment. It's a lot more of a gel. Remember, the aqueous humor was just that fluid. So once I remove the vitreous humor, what I'm going to see is this very pretty cream-colored structure. That is the retina. And you'll actually notice there's this kind of starburst pattern about right here. And if I pull that retina, and it's actually really, really thin, but if I kind of roll that up, what I'll notice is there's an area where it's attached and it's really hard to remove from. That area there is the optic disc. The optic disc is where the optic nerve, so if I put my finger here and put it right on the back, I'm going to find that optic nerve that I was talking about earlier. So that optic disc is our blind spot. It's where that optic nerve is entering into the eye, and that's the portion that we can't see. The other thing that sheep have that is a little different than us is they have this tapetum lucidum. So you see this really pretty, it's kind of like a bluish color. It's kind of like a pearl color. That right there is the tapetum lucidum, okay? So the tapetum lucidum, basically what it does is it's reflective. If you've ever seen deer in headlights, their eyes reflect, right? So that is what that's doing, is it's going to help with that, reflecting that light. And so when, you know, even dogs have it, dogs and cats have it. So when their eyes glow, it's because of that tapetum lucidum. Underneath the tapetum lucidum, you can see that black layer. That black layer is the choroid. That is the vascular layer. So the retina is the sensory layer, the choroid is the vascular layer, and then the sclera is that last layer. So 3 layers of the eyeball: sclera on the outside, cornea is the anterior portion of it, the choroid is the vascular layer, the ciliary body that we talked about here that kind of looks like that mushroom gill is the anterior portion, and then the retina is on the inside, and that is the sensory layer of the eye. And so the sensory layer of the eye, the retina, is actually where rods and cones are located. And once again, we do have that blind spot. That blind spot is because of where the optic nerve is entering and exiting the eye.